It was the summer of 1559. A tournament was underway, a celebration of the wedding of a royal daughter. The King of France, Henry II, a man confident in his power and his youth, rode out for the final joust. He wore the colors of his mistress, not his queen. He was, as always, performing for Diane de Poitiers, the woman who truly held his heart. Henry insisted on one final pass against the young captain of the guard, Gabriel Montgomery. The lances splintered. A shard, impossibly, disastrously, pierced Henry's gilded helmet, finding the soft tissue of his eye and lodging deep in his brain. The king fell, and in the stands, a woman in black watched, not with terror, but with a cold, almost surgical observation. Catherine de Medici, Queen of France, had spent 26 years in the shadows. Now, the single blinding instant of her husband's death would be the moment that finally gave her everything. This was not an accident. It was the spark that forged the Serpent Queen. To understand Catherine's transformation, we must first understand her prison. She arrived in France as a naive 14-year-old Florentine bride in 1533, bringing a massive dowry. But her husband, Henry, was captivated by one woman only, the formidable 20-year-older Diane de Poitiers. Diane was not just a mistress, she was a parallel queen. Henry showered her with Catherine's own jewels. He gave her the Château de Chenonceau. All official documents had to pass through Diane's hands. Catherine was forced to occupy a suite beneath Diane's, forced to witness the daily public affirmation of her husband's love for another woman. It was a humiliation that lasted 26 years. Catherine was desperate. She was the subject of endless scrutiny for her failure to produce a male heir in the early years. The only way out of her powerlessness was to become indispensable. She turned to the dark arts. Whispers circulated through the court of Catherine consulting with astrologers and occultists, of strange black potions she consumed, desperate to conceive. She kept a small private library dedicated to magic, toxicology, and dark chemistry. These acts weren't born of malice yet, but of sheer survival, a desperate, terrifying effort to secure her royal position. Her patience was eventually rewarded with 10 children. Yet even with an heir, she remained the queen in the shadows. Henry was king, but Diane was the undisputed power behind the throne. Then came the joust and the piercing of the lance. For 11 agonizing days, King Henry II lay dying. This makeshift sick room became the most potent battlefield in Europe. 2 women held vigil. Diane, openly weeping, utterly distraught. Her public grief a final desperate claim on the king's love. And Catherine, stoic, silent, observing every breath, every flicker of consciousness. For those 11 days, Catherine watched. And as she watched the life drained from the man who had publicly scorned her, all the accumulated rage, the humiliation, and the political fear crystallized into one single focus: power. She did not pray for his recovery. She prayed for the moment to begin. When Henry finally succumbed, the world expected Catherine, the quiet, ignored wife, to collapse in grief. Instead, she rose, and her first order was the single, most satisfying act of her life. The moment Henry II's body was cold, the meek Florentine bride vanished. The Serpent Queen was born. Her first act was not one of statecraft, but of calculated personal revenge. Messengers were dispatched to Diane de Poitiers. The message was concise and chilling. You are not to attend the king's funeral. You are immediately to return all the crown jewels and the titles to the estates, particularly Chenonceau. Diane, utterly stunned by this sudden, fierce command from the woman she had dismissed as weak, tried to resist. But Catherine's resolve was absolute. She reportedly sent this final, devastating instruction. The king was satisfied that I should be allowed to keep his crown, since you had had his heart for 25 years. Diane de Poitiers was exiled, disappearing into the obscurity of her own property. It was a flawless victory, not a messy emotional outburst, but a surgical removal of a political and personal rival. This cold, immediate response to Henry's death showed the court that the rules of power had changed. Catherine de' Medici was finally queen in more than name. With Henry gone, Catherine's eldest son, Francis II, inherited the throne, but he was frail and sickly. When Francis died just 18 months later, her second son, Charles IX, ascended at the age of 10. Catherine was now the official regent of France. France was not a nation, it was a powder keg. The French Wars of Religion, the battle between the Catholic establishment and the rising Huguenot, Protestant faction, threatened to tear the Valois dynasty apart. Catherine's focus shifted entirely from personal revenge to the survival of the crown. She played a high-stakes game of balancing power, making concessions to the Huguenots one day, aligning with the militant Catholics, the Guise family, the next. Her goal was not religious purity or love, but order and stability. She needed the Valois dynasty to survive, no matter the cost. The true test of the Serpent Queen came in August 1572. To broker peace, Catherine engineered a marriage between her daughter, Margaret, and the Huguenot leader, Henry of Navarre. The wedding brought the entire Protestant elite to Catholic Paris. When a Catholic extremist attempted to assassinate the revered Huguenot leader, Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, failing only to kill him, panic erupted. The Huguenots demanded justice. The powerful Guise family demanded a final solution. Catherine faced an impossible decision: allow the Guise family to drag France into a full-scale civil war, or eliminate the Huguenot leadership herself to regain control. All the cold calculation forged during her 11-day vigil over Henry's body returned. She made the choice that would forever define her reign of terror. She gave the order. On the night of St. Bartholomew's Day, thousands of Huguenots were slaughtered across Paris, extending into the provinces. This was not the act of a grief-stricken widow. It was the ruthless stroke of a political surgeon. The woman who had been humiliated at her wedding was now the cold architect of a national bloodbath. Catherine de' Medici became a murderer, not in a moment of passion, but in a lifetime of calculated self-preservation. Henry II's death gave her the power. The political climate forced her hand. She proved that when stripped of love, a queen's only purpose is to ensure the survival of her dynasty. Her legend is a harsh lesson. In the game of crowns, ruthlessness is not a vice. It is the ultimate virtue.